There's no question the Cleveland Browns need to right the ship this week, and maybe it got a little easier with the Jacksonville Jaguars coming to town on Sunday. Your latest Locked On Browns starts now.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Your host, Jeff Lloyd, and I appreciate all of you who make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. If you're not part of the everyday crowd, well, get on the bus, Gus, and subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. And, of course, Locked On Browns is always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. The OBR's Pete Smith is in the house. We're going to get to some topics here, chop it up as it's transition Tuesday, of course, as the Browns, 2 tough losses. I won't say all the way West Coast Denver, but definitely West Coast loss in LA. Coming back home here, a game that seems a little bit more, feasible. And look, I'm going to be honest, I thought the Jacksonville Jaguar game would be feasible. And I know Pete and I have had some conversations off air. We thought, certainly that would be the case, but we'll get to all that. But Pete, there is the window of opportunity here starting this week. We've obviously a lot of talk over the last couple of weeks about, how down the Browns are. But practice windows can start to open up here. We don't know if that's going to be the case for Jedrick Wills. Certainly Cam Mitchell, certainly another guy that would fall under that lens as well. And look, there's guys, and I don't care who sits where when the Browns are playing. If you're on IR and you're not coming back this year, I could give a crap where you sit, so we're not going to broach those subjects. But there could be a possibility that maybe a couple bodies could maybe start funneling back into the locker room here, which certainly is going to cause some roster gymnastics, which could be part of the reason where Joe Flacco was put back onto the practice squad anyway.
Yeah, Jaron Christian isn't good. So, but, given how Jedrick Wills has been, he's probably good enough to allow them to sort of let Wills heal a bit in terms of making sure he's right as opposed to just making sure he's ready. Like in a different circumstance, I think they would be in a hurry. But when he got hurt, the estimation was about 6 weeks. We'll see. Jed's, if nothing else, is a tough kid.
He's a tough kid.
Who plays through pain. So we'll see. The bigger deal to me is Cam because the Browns obviously are limited at corner. Denzel Ward's labrum. And the fact that Cam Mitchell played really well in some small opportunities.
The game he got hurt in was his best game as a pro. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he can play the slot, which is certainly helpful because it allows the Browns a little bit of versatility in terms of how they utilize Greg Newsome in situations. But, the Browns are obviously forced to play guys like, undrafted rookie Caleb Halasi, who I think is very intriguing in what he was able to do, and Mike Ford was sort of forced into duty, but clearly the Browns can get better at that position. So, hey, it's about time finally this season the Browns can start to get some guys back healthier and maybe get a little extra surge as opposed to just consistently losing guys.
No question about it. And you've noticed this, with obviously Denzel being out, and certainly, of course, with Cameron Mitchell, who technically should be the 4th cornerback on this team, being out as well. And the amount of times you saw number 28 or 25, it means, the amount of times, obviously, the teams are targeting number 28 and number 25, certainly. Now, Pete, I'm not sure the extent, and, Peterson certainly, obviously, every team does it. You're not going to spill the beans before you necessarily have to. But it was certainly a rough Monday Night Football game for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously, Christian Kirk left. It's described as a core injury. Putting a number on it seems, arbitrary at this point in time until somebody actually even has the surgery. But we know this is something Amari Cooper's gone through in his time here. Christian Kirk, wide receiver, certainly out. And then, of course, late in the game. And, the fact that, and I'll be honest, when I first saw him go down, before they walked him off the field because he wasn't carted off. And again, guys, Jacksonville, spend some money, man. Your star quarterback should not be walking 15,000 yards to get back to the locker room. But, Trevor Lawrence, obviously, significant injury. He's not ruled out yet for this week, but who knows if that's even true or possible or not. But for the Jaguars, man, rough Monday night, short week on the road. Weather could be a factor. Certainly for Jacksonville, not the best of Monday Night Football experiences.
Yeah, I mean, Amari Cooper had a core muscle injury last year. Obviously, he was able to play through it, but had to have surgery. Who knows if Kirk's is the same deal, but he's their top receiver, leading the team in receptions and yards. They've got other guys. Calvin Ridley, good player, inconsistent with his hands, certainly relatable, but has been a playmaker. And then they've got the tight end there that has been good as well. But Christian Kirk is a guy who can play from the slot, can line up in all kinds of different positions and put stress on defenses and matchups. And obviously, given the Browns' corner issues that we just mentioned, that would theoretically be a tactical advantage. Don't get lost in the fact that on the same play that Trevor Lawrence got hurt, the reason Walker Little was driven back and stepped on him is because he hurt his hamstring on that play. His left hamstring, which I believe is the foot that landed on the quarterback. So, now he's a question mark. So they could theoretically be down there starting left tackle on a line that already has a share of issues. I mean, the Jaguars were enjoying the Blake Hance experience yesterday as one of their linemen. So they've got some questions. I think they're on their third. They would be on their third and fourth tackle. So, they've got problems there. And then corner Trey Herndon is in concussion protocol. He's another guy that left that game. So look, Trevor Lawrence is obviously the biggest story of that. High ankle sprain. We've certainly seen guys play through it. It's, it's a little different. And then it was practically Tuesday morning before, it happened. And I guess the Jaguars medical staff thought he should walk it off for about a quarter mile. But the fact of the matter is, like, they were even talking about it in this game. Like, the Jaguars offense was starting to get going a little bit more, in part because he had lost his mobility a bit earlier in the season, was just getting it back. You saw them run the option in that game for a Travis Etienne touchdown. If he's limited to the pocket, certainly Trevor Lawrence can still throw the ball and do some things, but that's a big deal. Certainly, better than CJ Beathard, one would think, but nevertheless, is a big loss for them. And the fact that it's 5 days to game day would likely put his situation in doubt. I guess it depends how realistic it is. They think they can sort of catch the Ravens. They blew, that was a golden opportunity. And obviously the refs helped out and I think cheated CJ Beathard from what should have been a big play. But if they sort of take a look at this thing and go, look, we're not going to catch the Ravens, we're not going to get that 1 seed, then they don't have to press this hard. They've just got to make sure they win the division and find themselves in a good spot, which they can do whether Lawrence plays this week or not.
And to be fair, looking at the number 1 seed should not be their focus right now. Look, the Colts are a team that is just not going away. And certainly Houston, and look, obviously they had their own significant injury and loss, and rookie wide receiver Tyreek Hill has done a fantastic job for them. But if you're Jacksonville, that shouldn't be the goal right now. The goal should be making sure that somehow, some way you walk out of this with at least winning the AFC South. And then, you let the chips fall where they may, of course, when the playoffs come here. Your talk about dragging him and letting him walk his way all the way back certainly seems reminiscent of a young Antonio Callaway and Hugh Jackson and, the infraction of, making him play so much in a preseason game that he did, in fact, hurt his own hamstring way back in the day. Jeff Lloyd, Pete Smith, your latest Locked On Browns. Appreciate everybody for being along for the ride. If you are looking for a gift idea this year for the holidays and you're not sure, well, look, you got family who might not be close. You got friends who might not be close. Here's something that really, really probably would work. You can use the Skylight touchscreen photo frame. You can send photos to it straight from your phone. They appear in seconds. You can have it preloaded with photos before the box is opened. I know these types of things exist, but now you can update it. Now, look, if you have grandparents, aunts and uncles, people who live far away, as the kids grow, holidays, whatever it may be, it's a way to make them feel in touch and around, even though obviously they cannot be. It's a great, great idea. Great product that will work well for you as a holiday gift this year. As a special limited time offer for our listeners, you can get $15 off your purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/lockedon to get $15 off your purchase of a Skylight Frame. Again, skylightframe.com/lockedon. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/lockedon. And again, $15 off a Skylight Frame at skylightframe.lockedon. We continue on here. Your latest Locked On Browns. Your host, Jeff Lloyd. Appreciate all of you for making Locked On Browns your first listen. The everyday crowd. You don't need a minute to get into this party. You just need to subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel and make sure when you are done with this episode, you check out Locked On 247. We have a 24/7 streaming network of all our Locked On content. Biggest sports in town, biggest teams in town. Hopefully we get the Browns on there a little bit more, get this ship righted. Jeff Lloyd joined by Pete Smith from the OBR. Now, Pete, it's hard to obviously truly assess this game as it's early in the week. And, obviously, for the Browns, business begins on Wednesday, as it will for Jacksonville, short week for them as they go from Monday Night Football, go to a road game Sunday in Cleveland. Weather could be an issue. But for the Browns, some of this is going to be about starting to handle your own business. And you have two veteran coaches on this team in Bill Callahan. One of the biggest things Bill Callahan brings to this team is obviously his running game. This is something that is struggling right now. Jim Schwartz, look, we all knew this was going to happen. Jim Schwartz was not going to go out there, and this team was not going to be the greatest defense in NFL history. The league is too good. It's too balanced, except for starting quarterback play. There is no backup quarterback play in the NFL. But both of these veteran coaches now, and I'm not saying hot seat or anything like that, but, it's adjust to the adjustments. Teams are taking things away or teams are taking things to you. It's time to improve. It's time to change. It's time to make the next strategical move to counteract what is now being done to you.
Right. Certainly the Rams did a number of things that just created problems for the Browns defense in general. They did a really good job with how they blocked Myles Garrett. And the way they run their routes gave them problems. The same way the Colts receivers gave them problems. Shane Steichen and Sean McVay are really good at creating man beaters, creating problems for defensive backs and secondaries in general. And the Rams did that beautifully, both to set up their passing game and to create running lanes. You're starting to see teams take advantage of just how aggressive Jim Schwartz is. And we've seen this. We've seen this trickle out in games like against the Baltimore Ravens and some of these things where, they effectively parry the Browns defensive attack and then Keith Mitchell runs for a whole bunch of yards. Or, we've sort of seen little trickles of this here and there. And the Rams were able to take advantage of that to a point that they were not able to recover, even though it wasn't like a horrendous defensive performance. The other part of that is like freedom is great in a lot of ways. It's also kind of a problem when you don't do things like have a guy who's designated to seal the edge as a defensive lineman because they want to go charge into the backfield thinking they're going to go make plays. And you saw that with the jet sweeps and the fly sweeps and some of those plays or misdirections where guys are thinking, I'm going to get mine, and then, flew past. And the same thing that makes guys love playing in this defense can get you beat. And whether that means Jim Schwartz has to be a little more disciplined, which in some ways he was against the Ravens, just by virtue of the fact that you can't just let your defensive line do whatever they want against Lamar Jackson. They might have to do a little bit more in terms of their rules. Certainly getting healthier in the secondary would allow them to do some things in coverage. But, you've seen the Browns throw a lot of haymakers and hit. Now they got to figure out how to make, they've missed. Now they got to figure out what happens next. So that's going to be an interesting part of it. Running game. Look, I think you've seen 2 games in a row. The Browns running game was super inconsistent in the first half, particularly with run blocking. The Rams just outquicked them initially, and then they sort of found their footing. And then against the Denver Broncos, like the Browns were getting some big runs off those long developing plays, but they weren't getting like their traditional fare until in both games it started getting better in the second half. One, both quarterbacks sort of established themselves a little bit in that game. And then 2, the offensive line did a good job. They had some play calling that was good for the situation. So there are things in there where they can get better. Like we talked about post game, the interior of that line's got to be good. I mean, they don't have a choice. They have to be good. They're very well paid and everything else. And certainly Joe Bitonio doesn't seem to be right. Obviously had knee surgery during the season. But they've got to get more out of that group. They've got to be more consistent. So I don't think either of these situations are the sky's falling and it's time to panic, but this is welcome to the NFL and what it's about. When you play this many games, you're eventually going to get found out and teams are going to come up with answers and you're going to have to find out what is your next move. And that is, and the other part about that, I suppose, is the Browns defense has been a completely different story home versus away. They've been a shutdown defense at home and been pedestrian at times on the road. That hasn't helped either.
Certainly no question about it. Elijah Moore, Pete. Now, this is a guy that you and I, obviously, we were big fans of Elijah Moore even before, during his draft process when he was being wasted away with the Jets. I believe he had the highest air yard total of any wide receiver in the NFL this past week against the Los Angeles Rams. Is sometimes you don't know until you don't know. But for Elijah Moore, obviously playing with Joe Flacco, a player he certainly has some familiarity with. And, Joe Flacco, look, when you're 6'6", 240 pounds, obviously, your short game is probably what you're not known for. Your long game is. But maybe hopefully, that box, that bottle, that genie out of the lamp is maybe open now for Elijah Moore. And maybe now, because the Browns have hopefully seen it, they can kind of maybe go to it a little more. He is not just this gimmicky player. I'm not saying he can't do some of that stuff. And this has always been my aggravation with it is he's got to show everything before teams are scared to death of him. So the fact that he's not beating anybody on a 25-yard route is not scaring anybody when you put him in the backfield. He's got to beat teams as a wide receiver before you're even worried about going to all that Percy Harvin-ish type crap.
I agree with you. Also, I can't help but wonder if running all those jet sweeps against the Browns defense convinced them they were living a lie, because it probably worked every single time. But having said that, look, Elijah Moore's drops are irritating. The entire receiving group's drops are irritating. But it's almost like it's catchy. It's like a cold that runs through a house. Once one guy drops it, it's almost like the next guy's in line. Not saying trying to, but it's almost like the next guy in line, there's going to come one from him too. Yes, I do think in some ways the Browns receivers are pressing. I think they've been doing that all year long. Some of that is by virtue of the fact that the quarterback position has been so uneven. You're having so many quarterbacks, and then it feels like in some ways the few opportunities you're getting the ball, you have to sort of make it, a home run as opposed to just executing what you need to do. Elijah Moore in particular is a guy who's always trying to think about what happens after the catch. Him and David Njoku have that same problem.
Yep.
You want guys to be like that, but got to catch the ball. But look, the thing is he consistently gets open against everybody. He gets open. Now, the situation with Amari Cooper being out, they had to move Elijah Moore to X. That certainly allowed him to get more looks. But I also can't help but hope that the Browns are sitting there going, okay, we've just got to find ways to get him the ball more. Now, maybe having Joe Flacco at quarterback, if that's the route they go, allows them to do that more. But whether they have Amari Cooper healthy or not, Elijah Moore has been open all season. And when he's gotten the ball, he's rewarded you for it. I think given the amount of hype that came with him in the preseason and stuff, that was always weird. It's always going to be viewed as a disappointing season, but I do think, particularly since he's going to be back next year, they are figuring out better ways to use him, and allows them to open up things. And he created space for other guys. So there's just a lot there. But to your point, he finally gets the deep ball where he gets to make a play on it. Better ball, he scores. Mm-hmm. So I think there's just a lot with Elijah Moore. I think some of it, the Browns knew what they had in him and just haven't been able to get to it because of the inconsistency at quarterback. And then some of it, I think, like everybody else does, you sort of get in these play calling ruts where you sort of feel like you're limited because of everything else, and you're not sort of pushing the boundaries. And maybe that sort of allows them to feel confident that they can do some of those things. Flacco helps. If they end up with DTR, I think the more comfort he finds, he's going to be able to do some of those things as well.
Well, we did have some wide receiver talk just here, which is going to let us go to segment 3 here, because we're going to dip into the first little bit of draft talk here for the 2023 on Locked On Browns, as we are now into officially the bowl season. Jeff Lloyd, joined by the OBR's Pete Smith. Appreciate everybody for sticking around. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. We are the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on a 2 to 6 player stat projection, and you watch the winnings roll in. You want to play alongside some of PrizePicks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the PrizePicks community each week. PrizePicks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. We will get you your Browns lineup and numbers later in the week, but make sure you go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, the new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in any action than now. The app is super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over, unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Jeff Lloyd, joined by the OBR's Pete Smith. Appreciate you all for making Locked On Browns your first listen. Make sure you checked out Locked On Sports Today 247, Locked On Coverage 247 on the YouTube page, 365 days a year. Pete, gonna tip the toes into the water here. Initial thoughts here on what looks to be the 2024 class. Obviously, just starting to shaping up here. And look, guys, we don't know nothing yet. We know maybe some guy, positions where contracts are up, this, that, or the other thing. But Pete, offensively, there ain't no denying that wide receiver class the way it's shaping up to this point. And looking at what the Browns have there ain't no way you don't have some interest there.
Well, look, I think the Browns' lack of talent at wide receiver is somewhat overstated. Obviously, Amari Cooper is legit. I like we talked about. I think there's more to Elijah Moore than we've seen so far. I think there's more in the tank. I'm pretty happy with what I'm seeing from Cedric Tillman. David Bell, not dynamic whatsoever, but just does his job every time. And so then you're left with, Marquise Goodwin obviously hasn't been available, but that then leads into what you're talking about. Certainly the Browns need to keep drafting players. Even if Elijah Moore was everything we hoped he is, they still need to, because next year he's going to be in the final year of his contract. Mm-hmm. Amari Cooper may be here one more year. Who knows? Maybe they'll extend him somehow. But at that point, it's like Cedric Tillman, David Bell, and David Njoku is your offense. So there's an incentive to continue to build for the sake of getting as many weapons as possible. You don't want to be the Chiefs. And then there's the incentive because you have to sort of start backfilling your roster, which Cedric Tillman was a part of. And obviously the Browns don't have their first round pick. They're still picking the second round, but it's another, last year was a curiously weak receiver class. We didn't know such a thing could still be possible given the sheer amount of passing and the amount of receivers on the field. This year should be very good. We'll see where guys start to shake out and we start to get workouts and stuff, but there's some guys who are certainly intriguing. it's really difficult to sort of predict where some of these players are going to be. And, but like guys that sort of jump out to me in terms of, age and production. The kid I love is Xavier Worthy from Texas. Now, I feel like if you draft him, you need a dome. He's just electric. He's got sort of some Deshaun Jackson type. One, the size of him and his legs. And two, he's just super quick, has tremendous burst and all these other things. He can stop and go like nobody's business. I have a suspicion he's not going to last to the Browns, which is disappointing. So if you're talking about guys I think are going to be perhaps a little more realistic, I really like Jermaine Burton from Alabama. Obviously with
the Georgia transfer caught the touchdown pass in the SEC championship game.
Like Milroe, their quarterback, they haven't thrown a ton with him. He's obviously done a lot of work with his legs, and he's been sort of developing on the fly, so it's sort of limited their opportunities. But Burton is still their leading receiver in all the right ways. He's only got like 30-some balls, but he's got a ton of yardage for it. And I like the way he competes for the football. I like his physicality. Plays with a lot of effort. So there's some stuff to like with him. So he's one of the guys that stands out. I think you're going to find a lot of those guys in that range. The Browns obviously like SEC guys anyway.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. Maybe Burton's going to test out of his mind and fly out of their range, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if he's sort of around in that third round area, sort of right where Cedric Tillman might have been. As an option, and it'll be interesting to see if they get somebody like that. I do feel like they would benefit to get somebody else who has speed, somebody else, but not necessarily a fidget. Don't get another tiny guy, and that comes down to the realities of the division. Like, for example, Tank Dell is phenomenal in Houston. It's a shame he got hurt. I think he's great with CJ Stroud. I think he's great in Houston. I do not think he would be great in the AFC North.
Very fair point.
I think he would have a lot of trouble, especially with some of the weather games that the Browns have dealt with. And I think he gets lost in that type of atmosphere, which is why I said what I said about Xavier Worthy. I love his game. I just worry about those type of players in this type of environment. So I do think, on top of everything else, just how the Browns have drafted and the guys they've sort of sought, they like guys who are big and physical and give them sort of a size advantage. Burton is sort of in that realm of being about 200 pounds. So I would suspect, I'm not going to rule out anything at this point, but I think those are the guys that make sense. I think they want those tough guys who can play in all sorts of conditions and fit sort of what they are, and then have that advantage of being able to block for a running game that wants to, physically dominate at the point of attack.
Oh, no block, no rock. It's been a tale ever since Kevin Stefanski's been here. Rashard Higgins certainly can be one to tell you that tale. He is Pete Smith from the OBR. Make sure you check everything over there. Obviously, Pete, a highly coveted free agent in the OBR, had a need for a point man, and it worked out perfectly as Pete and the OBR, two entities separately that I love that are great now together. Make sure you're following @_ Pete Smith _ Make sure you check out the Browns Place podcast with Pete and Bree, of course. Myself, Jeff Lloyd, @Jeff _LJ _Lloyd. Appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. Make sure you are subscribed to the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Don't be left out. And of course, the show is always available, always free wherever you get your podcasts. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound LGB on ELOB. Let's go, Browns.